Hi, welcome back. This is C. Oleg Wildridge with the Hemlock Vales Protogrove ADF, and today we're going to be talking about some ephemera, some cosmologies, calendars, and astrological associations for your practice. This is not necessarily the most coherent of videos that I'm going to do, but it should have some interesting little details that might be able to improve and deepen the practices that you already do, or introduce you to possibilities that you may not have considered before. So first, let's touch on cosmology. What I'm going to talk about here is the Indo-European three worlds model. As you can see, there's the upper world above the top of the tree or in its branches, the middle world around the center, and then the lower world below the roots of the tree. Now, this is a very general idea of how the cosmos is split into an upper world, generally a shining sky or light oriented space, a middle world in which humans live with the spirits that live around us in nature and in this world, and then also the lower world, often associated with darkness and the dead, where ancestors may dwell in some cosmologies, although not always. Now, there are some specific cultural models from different Indo European cultures that follow this three worlds, but with their own hearth culture in mind. The first, which I have discussed in a different video, is the Celtic model, especially Irish, which is the words that I'm using here, of sky, earth, and sea, where instead of being a tiered system, like one on top of the other, it's more of a system where these three elements blend together. The sky, earth, and sea come together to form the cosmos around us, where we are in the center of those three elements. And the earth is where we are, the sky is above our heads, the seas expand around us, and there is a level of our world is the top layer and the other world is the bottom layer or across the sea. In the Germanic model, which generally holds true for most of the Germanic cultures, there is Niflheim, Muspelheim, and the Void, or called Ginnungagap in Old Norse, where the world tree grows. So to the north is Niflheim, the land of ice, where the elements of cold and water come from. And in Muspelheim to the south, this is the area of fire, warmth, and heat. And where they meet in the center within the cosmic void is where life was created and the world tree grows up, which cradles the many worlds of the Norse cosmology, or just the middle world where we live, called Midgard in Old Norse. Those runes that I've included, Hagalads for Niflheim means hail and change. Iwaz for the void in the world tree is specifically that world tree, Yggdrasil, which cradles the many worlds. And Muspelheim is Fehu, the generative fire, or fertility in this case. In the Greek system, there is the sky, which is represented by the realm of the gods, the Olympus, with that mountain being sort of the cosmic center, the center point, like the tree would be in some others. The sea and the earth, which form the middle realm, and then Hades, or the underworld, which is associated with the dead as well as the deep under earth connections. Please talk to Reverend Avende to know more about the sort of Greek and Hellenic models. I'm not an expert. The Iranian, Vedic, and Avestan, as well as Scythian model, where the three realms are broken apart into the heavens, the transcendent realm, the atmosphere, and then the earth. So instead of having it be under earth, it's actually heavens, atmosphere, earth, and the deities and spirits are organized with those three layers in mind. And then within the Slavic idea, there is an oak world tree, which up above it in the branches, the sky is Prav or Pravia, the realm of the gods ruled by Perun. In the center is Yav or Yavia, which is the earthly realm, represented by the goddess Mokosh, the Earth Mother, where we live. And then below in the watery depths is Nav or Navia, which is associated with the cattle god and prosperity god Veles, who is also a horned deity. And so using these models as we switch around or explore our hearth cultures, we can use them to better understand the cosmos around us and invoke those while we're doing ritual, as well as to understand where we are when we're doing our magical work. So a good way to do this is to try to establish a prayer or a practice that orients you in the cosmos you're working with. I usually do this for my Slavic work, where I talk about Pravia, Yavia, Navia. But in my other works, I also use the basic Indo-European model of upper, middle, and lower worlds to kind of understand where I am while I'm doing my practices and workings. Now, we can also talk about the classical elements. So you may see these in sets of 4 or 5. The 5 elements, which is used in a lot of witchcraft and Wicca, forms the pentacle, the 5-pointed star, where the interacting elements of spirit at the center, water in the west, fire in the south, earth in the north, and air in the east form this sort of protective symbol, this generative, this, I should rather say, symbol of power that represents the work that is being done, the magic that is happening, and the circle in which it happens. And you may find this with corner calling or other forms of setting space using these elements. I've included the Latin names of these elements as well: air, terra, ignis, aqua, and aether. But you may find them under other names as well. Another system is the elemental cross, where the 4 classical elements are set in a cross shape with different properties and qualities between them. So we have air, which is associated with blood and spring; water, which is associated with phlegm and winter; earth with black bile and autumn; fire with yellow bile and summer. And they're also separated in half by the active or masculine elements of air and fire, and the passive or feminine elements of water and earth. This doesn't necessarily mean a gender binary is absolute, but rather an association. And between water and air, we have the wet quality; between air and fire, the warm quality; between fire and earth, the dry quality; and between earth and water, the cold quality. Now, this is connected also to humoral theory, which says that there are these 4 humors, the black bile, phlegm, yellow bile, and blood, running through our bodies, and that through balance of those humors, we are well, and through imbalance, we are not well, which is associated also with astrological ideas of elements and different ancient theories of health and wellness. Nowadays, we know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but some people still use this for extra medical help. I personally would suggest you always seek medical attention before trying to use any of the magical techniques of healing that may be more extreme, which are associated with the humoral theory. This elemental cross can also be associated with the circle of quarter calling, with the different elements in different quarters, and their directions are usually as stated: water in the west, fire in the south, air in the east, earth in the north. However, there are some differences. Now, we're going to assume northern hemisphere here in a lot of what we're talking about, but if we look at how these elemental directions got put into place, if we look at a map of Europe where these come from, it makes sense for Earth to be in the north if we're talking about Mediterranean thought, because look at all this land up here in the north. To the east, we have the steppes, so that makes a lot of sense that this would be air, this open plains land with a lot of storms and windy weather. To the south, you have the north coast of Africa, as well as the Sahara Desert, so fire makes sense to be in the south as you get warmer towards the equator. And then to the west, we have water, which is associated, the Atlantic Ocean. So that makes sense. In the United States, there's been some talk about maybe reversing water and air, because it might make more sense with the land that we are with, because you have the Atlantic Ocean here on the East Coast, open plains land here in the middle with mountains as well, associated with air. We have Canada, which is a huge country up here, which is, Earth. And we move towards the south again, towards the equator, we get warmer weather, so that could be associated with fire. You could make a similar argument that the European model works because we have the Pacific Ocean on the west coast here, and we could say that air would be associated with the, forests and mountains of the East Coast as well in some way. It really just depends on how you want to go about understanding these elemental forces in your work and practice. The groups that I've been a part of generally use the European model, but there's no reason to say why this American model wouldn't work either. Now, let's move on to some calendars, ways to understand the passage of time, since we've been talking about space. So let's add this time element. Here we have a neo-pagan wheel of the year. It tracks the 8 holidays that are practiced by many, many different pagan groups across the world. With the beginning, the new year at Samhain, which is one of the Celtic holidays, commemoration, death, the beginning of a dark period of the year, which forms the right side of this circle, and the light half of the year forms the left side. So from Samhain, in commemoration of the dead, we move to Yule, which is a celebration of the shortest day of the year, that winter solstice, community, and the return of the sun. Imbolc, which is another Gaelic holiday, and that is usually celebrated on February 1st, is often practiced with cleansing. Ostara, which takes its name from a Germanic goddess of the dawn, is a springtime celebration, often connected with Easter celebrations in the Christian tradition and other sorts of returning of fertility and life traditions across the world. Now we have Beltane, the beginning of the light half of the year. This is a time of fertility, creativity, generation, birth, sexuality. All those things are wrapped up into a lot of Beltane celebrations, as well as the ability to just be outside in the warmth and enjoy the weather. Midsummer is a celebration of the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, where there's a lot to do with fire and sunlight, and as well as completion, that recognition of the sun's cycle. Lunasa is another Gaelic holiday, and it is the time for games, for harvest, feasting, celebration, competition, being together. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. And then Mabon is a holiday that has been created more relatively recently, recognizing, again, harvest associations, as well as the decline of the sun and the movement into the dark part of the year, a preparation for Samhain and the new year. Now, that's the general neo-pagan wheel of the year, but we can also look at the Gaelic cross of the year. Again, beginning at Samhain, from the night of October 31st to November 1st, which is celebrated as Halloween in the United States. This holiday is associated with the Morrigan and the Dagda. They're coupling on this day at New Year. You could even argue that it might be a myth about birthing the new year, conceiving of it in the dark side, which starts at the beginning of Samhain and moves through to Beltane as the dark half of the year. It's also associated with the ancestors, the dead who return from the other world to join us. Lots of people put out offerings and commemorate their dead at this time. There's also associated with fairies, or the good people, who go about to their winter homes at this time and are said to be tricksy or difficult, possibly even dangerous around this time. So people might make offerings to try to placate them, to make it so they won't hurt them, or as to recognize their movement across the landscape, although I personally think it's best to leave them alone. You can also guise, so that's dressing up in costumes and trying to move amongst the spirits in a safe way, as well as being a fun way to include children and children at heart in this tradition. It is also called the Witches' New Year, or is the Gaelic New Year, Celtic New Year, where we begin a new cycle, because in the Celtic way of thinking, days, years, etc., all began in the dark part. At the beginning of the dark was the beginning of the day or the year. So we begin with this dark half of the year, and we move towards Imbolc around February 1st, which is associated with the goddess Brigid, as well as the Cailleach, the old woman, the goddess of Scotland, who's also seen as a winter form of Brigid. At this time, this is when animals begin to get ready to give birth. So it's a time of purification, cleansing, cleansing fire and cleansing water, as well as Cluti magic, so strips of fabric which are tied to trees or around holy wells, especially around the concept of healing magic. So it's a time to purify, cleanse, and heal, either in the name of the goddess or the saint Brigid, or the coming of Brigid out of the Cailleach phase of the year. Then we move on to Bealtaine, or Beltane, which I associate with Angus MacOch, the young god, Brigid's younger half-brother, son of the Dagda and Boan. He is a god of fertility, love, sex, sexuality, lust, etc. It's also the time when the good people, or the fairies, come trooping back to their summer homes, and they are in a kind of a good mood, good spirits. So people might leave out some offerings to them to welcome them back to their summer homes and time of light. It's also associated with sexuality, fertility, creativity, a time of awakening, warmth, and light as the sun returns and we're moving from spring to summer. And this is the beginning of the light half of the year. Then we get to Lunasa, which has the name of Lughlafada, the thunder god. as well as a god of culture, and his foster mother, Teltiu of the Fair Balg, who apparently cleared a lot of land for harvesting, but unfortunately died due to this and was founded the town of Telton in Ireland. It is a time of harvest and celebration, of food and feasting and being in community. The Teltu, the Éanach Teltu, in some forms of Irish, was a time when everyone from Ireland would come together. They would celebrate marriages, funerals, big political gatherings, games and competitions. So many people still keep up that games and competition aspect in their rituals to honor Lu as well as Telthu in these times, and to celebrate the harvest, which would take a lot of time and effort working together to get. So that was a really important part of those holidays, and some people still have it. And then we move back again into Samhain for the new. There are many different ways to go about practicing any of these holidays, and you'll find lots of different resources that say a lot of different things. But the way that I generally do it is, or have done it, is at Samhain, commemorating the dead, the Morrigan, and the powers of magic and the dark, as well as acknowledging the movement of the fairies without getting in their way. Doing purification and healing rituals with Brigid at Imbolg, and recognizing the departure of the Kayak, as she is very important, if an underrated goddess, one that is not venerated enough, in my opinion. At Bealtaine, embracing that creative, warm, and light energy. It doesn't have to just be about sex and birth. It can be also about creativity, art, culture, these things we want to bring into the world. So a great time to make art and celebrate those springtime traditions. And then, of course, competition and games in community with friends for Lunasa. But lots of people celebrate it differently, so find the best way to celebrate it for you in your circumstances. Another calendar is the Wheel of the Year mapped to a Norse hearth culture, beginning at Yule or Jólablot. Blot simply means a sacrifice. It recognizes that it is a ceremony in which we're making a sacrifice in the old days of an animal, probably. But nowadays, we just give food, drink, poetry, other forms of non-blood sacrifice rituals, because that is no longer our practice. The associated rune I have with this is Wunyo, joy. It is a time to recognize the return of the sun and enjoy the company of others. It is the period in which the gods are closest to earth in some traditions. It's an idea where the spirits are about. It is a liminal time, a sort of on the edge time of the new year, where we can connect with the spiritual more powerfully. During this time, there's lots of feasts, ceremonies, things done together. And we can see some similarities to Christian Christmas traditions with greenery, associations with light, family, feasting, fun, all gift giving. All these things are also associated with Jólablot. Then we have January 14th for Thorablot. This is the ceremony, the blot for Thor. We often ask for his protection at this time, or at least I have, and honor Thor as protector of humanity and striker down of diseases, as well as thunder god and sort of general patron of the human species within the Norse tradition. Dísablot, around February 1st, is a time to honor the feminine ancestors called the Disir and make offerings to them, as well as the Asainur, the goddesses of the Norse tradition. This can take many, many forms. We've done, where I am, a local tradition where we've had people dress up as these goddesses, regardless of their gender, to help give blessings to the community and honor the Disir, our feminine ancestors. Ostarablot, which I have associated with the rune Dagaz, balance, because it is an equinox, is the time of the return of the light with the goddess Ostara, or Iostre. She is an Anglo-Saxon goddess, but you can also use that in a Norse context with the Ostara. The idea that the dawn, the sun is returning. It's those springtime traditions and associations coming back in again. Then we have not March 21st, I'm sorry. That should read May 1st with Walpurgisnacht. So it is the time of that fertility. In the tradition of the folks I'm with, it's honoring of Freya and the powers of fertility, creativity, magic that are coming back into the world as the sun returns, warmth and light return, and the plants and animals begin to grow and give birth. Liethesblot is associated with the sun. It is the summer solstice, and that's associated with the Norse goddess Sunna, who is literally the embodiment and charioteer of the sun. This is a time to celebrate the height of the sun. It's the longest day, and so we thank her for all the gifts that she gives us and for her continuous cycle throughout the year. Then Lammas is the harvest around August 1st. This is Lunasa in the Celtic conception, the Gaelic conception. Lammas is the loaf mass, literally. So it is the time of celebrating the harvest, which is associated with the rune Yera, which is the harvest or completion and success rune. It is a time for feasting, thanking the harvest and the spirits of the harvest, as well as the gods, for everything that they have given us. Then we move on to Freysblot, which is another harvest festival, but especially to the god Freyr, an associated rune of Fehu, or wealth. Freyr is a god of fertility, of wealth, goodness, good leadership, kingship, associated with light and like the rain that brings life. And so I have honored Freyr at this time, who has in the past been my patron, and honor the powers that Freyr represents, as well as the Vanir, the gods of fertility and agriculture within the Norse system. His symbol of Ingwaz is also associated with Alvablot, as Freyr is the king of the elves. And at Alvablot, we here often take time to honor the land spirits, the elves, and the ancestors who bring fertility and life in the world, and recognize that the season is changing and turning to the dark side of the year, the dark time of the year. And we want to make sure that we honor these land spirits so they'll work with us in the coming year. And this was really important for agriculture as well. So that's just some calendars. There's many more. I am currently working on a Slavic version for my own practice. I don't feel it is complete enough to share here, but I may share it at a different time. You can map these things to the Wheel of the Year function, or you can create your own or follow ancient ones if you find them. There's lots of different calendars, like the Colony calendar from Gaul. There's different festivals across the Hellenic year, across the Roman different calendars. There are many different, as well as the Egyptian, Babylonian, on and on and on and on. It's really about finding the calendar that works best for you. Most pagans will at least understand this Wheel of the Year concept, and I like it because it gives you a good spread of holidays across the year to work into your spirituality without having to try to adapt to a calendar which was made in a much older era where people's jobs and lives were quite different than they are now in the modern industrial world. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is some planetary associations. I am not a master astrologer by any means. I mostly just hang out with them. But there are some associations between deities and planets which you can incorporate into astrological practices if you have them, or just how you interact with these planets. You see on the left side here, we have the different symbols for the different planets, and then the name of that planet in English, followed by the name of the deities associated with that planet in Latin. So we have Sol for the sun, Mercurius for Mercury, Venus for Venus, Luna for the moon, Tellus Mater for Earth, Mars for Mars, Jupiter for Jupiter, Saturnus for Saturn, Uranus for Uranus, Neptunus for Neptune, and Dispater for Pluto. Now you can associate those deities. We also have the Greek ones, Helios for the sun, Hermes for Mercury, Aphrodite for Venus, Selene for the moon, Gaia for Earth, Ares for Mars, Zeus for Jupiter, Cronus for Saturn, Uranus for Uranus, Poseidon for Neptune, and Hades for Pluto. We also have the Babylonian associations, which I'm not an expert on. Same with the Kemetic or ancient Egyptian ones. The Vedic ones are part of a different Vedic system of astrologies. The Babylonians, Egyptians, and the Vedic societies all had slightly different astrology that is somewhat related to the modern Western astrology. What I want to talk about is the Germanic associations which have been made. We have Suna for the sun, Wodanaz for Mercury, so that's in Norse called Odin, Frio for Venus, or Frigga or Freya, depending on your association with Venus. I would say probably more Freya. Menon or Mani for the moon. Urtho or Yorth for Earth. Tiwaz or Tyr for Mars. Thunraz or Thor for Jupiter. Luco or Loki for Saturn. Yumyaz or Ymir for Uranus. Neptune would be Nerthus or Nerthus. And Pluto would be Halio or Hel. These associations, some of them are modern, some of them are ancient, and I have introduced some of my own thinking into it. But if you want to associate planets in a Germanic hearth culture, then you can use these Proto-Germanic names, which I have done using runic astrology as well, although that's much more complicated in some ways and slightly untested, in my opinion. Then I have also included the Irish associations that I have made. This is based on very little scholarship around astrology and more upon the associations of those planets and deities in other hearth cultures. And you may find that I am entirely off base, but I wanted to share them just in case they might be useful to you. So Anya or Grania is the sun. Ogma, the god of knowledge, speechcraft, champion of the Tuatha De Danann, is Mercury. Angus Og, the god of lust, sexuality, love, vitality, youth, is Venus. Boan, the goddess of the river Boyne, goddess of wisdom, is the moon. Danu is Mother Earth, the Earth Mother and founder of the Tuatha De Danann clan. Nuada, the god of justice, righteous war, kingship, leadership, is Mars. Jupiter, the thunder god planet, is associated with Lu, the culture god, also a bringer of joy and freedom. Saturn, which is Saturn is associated with like harvest god, responsibility, and dedication, is the Dagda, who is a god of the earth, a god of harvest, knowledge, culture, well-being, the good things in life, food also. Uranus, who is associated with Uranus, this sort of destructive elder god related to the thunder god. Idea is Balor, grandfather of Lu, who Lu defeats at the Battle of Moytura. I've associated with Uranus. Manannán mac Lir, god of the sea, sort of a trickster and a shapeshifter, teacher type. I've associated with Neptune. And Dawn, one of the Milesians who became apotheosized, which means he became a god, who's associated with death, like Pluto and Dispeter and Hades. So he has been slotted into the Pluto section. Feel free to use these associations or ignore them, but I hope that they might be helpful to you in developing your practice as well, especially if you're working within a hearth culture that doesn't have a surviving astrology. You can put these hearth cultural understandings onto a Western system of astrology if that feels better for you or more relatable. Some folks might object to this, but I don't think it's such a big deal. So thank you for watching, and I hope you will join us for another video when you're ready. See you later.